The dialogue advice that you've heard or are using might be actually hurting your book more than helping it. A lot of dialogue advice out there sucks. And yes, I did just say that out loud. But frankly, if you're trying to learn how to write dialogue from somebody that's finished one book, maybe two books, and actually doesn't have any experience as an author, do they really know what they're doing yet? They're still figuring it out, just like you are. So you want to listen to people that have been there, that have failed, that have succeeded, that have really figured it out. That's how you avoid getting really bad advice, is you pick and choose who you're listening to and who you're learning from. I encourage you to pause this video, look down in this description, and read my bio. I've done this a bazillion times, so I know how to do it. Do I get it perfect every time? Nobody does. But here's some advice that you should totally ignore so that you can write better dialogue. And at the end, a little pro tip for those intermediate to advanced authors. Number one, you don't have to get all the grammar right. Because when people talk in real life, we're not using proper grammar all the time. We use a lot of contractions, we have pauses, we, kind of make up our own phrases. We don't necessarily even say full sentences because we're just having a conversation with somebody else. And I don't know about you, but I don't like the pressure of having perfect grammar in every one of my conversations. That is way too much pressure. So book characters are the same way. They don't say everything perfectly, and if they do, it becomes a college textbook, frankly.
Do not despair, Primat. We will be rescued. Until then, we must adapt.
And you don't want that. So allow your characters to kind of trail off, to stop their dialogue in the middle of a sentence, to have a partial sentence, to kind of hint at something, all of those sort of things. It does not have to be perfect. And in fact, if you're writing characters from some kind of a region or a particular history or a particular culture, then their dialogue will reflect that. You don't want to make it racist or stereotypical. Definitely don't do that. But really study the different pattern. How people speak in Massachusetts, which is where I grew up, is different than how people speak in Indiana, which is where I raised my kids, and how people speak in Florida, which is where I live now.
That have already been put in place in New Hampshire.
There's certain little regional things, like even cola versus soda versus pop, that make it unique to that particular place. So do a little research. The other bad thing that people tell you to do is just get the dialogue on the page. Well, a lot of times when you do that, everybody sounds just like you, right? The characters have to sound unique to them. So get to know your characters before you start writing their dialogue. How old are they? Where did they grow up? Are they shy? Are they extroverted? What kind of education do they have? What kind of career do they have? All of those things affect how your character speaks. Somebody that's really shy won't have 5 pages of dialogue because they're not going to want to talk a lot. A Gen Zer is going to have a totally different dialogue from a baby boomer. A pilot will reference things differently than a carpenter might. Then use that in your character's dialogue so each of the characters sound differently.
You just drop in and just smack the lip, whoop, drop down, snap.
Male characters also speak differently than female characters. And if you're struggling with that, watch some movies. Go out into the wild and go listen to people talk. You will see that by and large, not all the time, which is what I mean about not being stereotypical, but by and large, men tend to be problem solvers. Women tend to be listeners. Women tend to be more emotive. They tell more about how they're feeling, and men just really never kind of touch on that. But when you're creating your characters, you want to kind of look at, is this somebody that would really tell everybody how they're feeling? Is this somebody that would really try to solve the problem or move on from the emotional conversation? And use that in their dialogue. The other thing that I've heard a lot, and I say this, but I need it in a different way, is that dialogue is a plot tool. Yes. Totally a plot tool. Every word in your book, remember, should be moving your plot forward. Every word in your book should be triggered by something that happens in the book. But a lot of people use dialogue as an actual plot tool. Like, I am going to go into this garage and I am going to find this clue and then I'm going to bring it to the police and I'm going to solve the murder. Okay, that's way too much information. Most of us don't speak that way. And here's the thing about real life. No one tells you everything. They don't tell you their whole history. They don't tell you all the emotions going on in their head. And the cool thing about that with dialogue is that your character doesn't have to tell another character everything. The things that they keep hidden The things that they don't say out loud are the things that maybe the reader knows or that the reader is going to be intrigued by so that they keep going. Do not have your character spell it all out on the page, because nobody does that in real life, and telling everything just makes it really boring and takes away all the fun of it. So allow your dialogue to hint at things or hide things or just kind of skim the surface so that then the character's actions speak louder than their words. If your character says something like, "I'm not a nosy person," but then they go and snoop in the other character's bathroom, then you know they're a nosy person. And then the reader knows, maybe this character has something to hide. And maybe this character is lying. And that is something that a lot of authors don't think about when they're writing their dialogue. Here's the thing. Most of us lie in some way, shape, or form on a regular basis. When your friend comes up and she's got this new dress that she's so excited about and she's like, "How does it look?" You're like, "Oh, it looks great." Or if somebody comes and says, "Hey, how's the writing going? Are you finishing that book?" "Oh, yeah, I've got lots of pages done today." Right? We all kind of tell these little white lies. And then we also tell other lies that keep us from having to expose our inner selves. What I mean is that if you've had like a really traumatic past or had something really bad happen to you, you don't just randomly bring that up with somebody in the grocery store. We generally do not expose all the inner workings of ourselves to other people. And your characters are the same. They're going to tell lies because they're not going to want to talk about that traumatic past, or they're not going to want to get in trouble with the person that they're talking to, or they're trying to protect somebody. Maybe it's even themselves. Your characters are going to lie too. And my pro tip for that is to make your character untrustworthy. When they lie and then their actions or their thoughts go against what they just said, then the reader doesn't know if they're a good person or a bad person. And I really like that complexity of character. Study books where they've done a really good job with that, where you're not sure until you get to the end of the book if this is a good person. Lisa Unger, Riley Sager, Lucy Foley, Frida McFadden, a lot of those authors do a really good job of making you think, who is this character? And that is what keeps people up till the middle of the night reading. So that's why that's kind of a pro tip. If you can make your character come across as questionable on the page, but still somebody that the reader likes, then you can really keep them intrigued about how it's going to turn out and whether this is a good person or not. And that's what I meant about their actions speaking louder than their words. If your character lies, but then they have an action that goes against that, that becomes an untrustworthy character. And untrustworthy characters are super interesting. And if you want some tips on how to write really compelling characters that are like that, then watch this video right here, because it will really help you create that emotional depth that keeps the reader glued to your book.